Supreme Court draft decision leaked. We go deep here on TSP. I'm Dr. Evil Genius.
I'm Captain Paul.
And we're gonna get a little bit into this leak right here, and then we're gonna get a little bit into the whole Roe v. Wade and this fight for prenatal termination. What do you know of the leak itself?
For the leak itself, it's something that's unprecedented. It's never ever happened before in the U.S.'s history, where you have a document of this nature leaked to the public before it's ratified or anything has gone further. So the leak itself is very historic in that sense. Roe versus Wade is essentially the federal government kind of having their ruling on abortions and the right to have them, or the woman's right to have them, I should say. Essentially, this opinion piece that's been leaked. I have to remind people this is an opinion. This isn't going to be something that's completely ratified. This doesn't necessarily represent all the justices' views as of right now. Doesn't mean it's going to be passed. But this opinion is essentially like why Roe v. Wade should be overturned and why, like, if it goes forward with how it looks, if it does get overturned, the reasoning behind it. They feel like when they made that judgment years and years ago, that they weren't taking the Constitution and not going by the legal binding, or I should say, the legal binding document itself, and they were interpreting it or misinterpreting. So this would essentially be overturning Roe v. Wade and getting rid of it and making it essentially, instead of the federal level deciding things, the state level you decide it. So blue states, abortion. Red states, not abortion. That's pretty much how it's going to go down the line, most likely. I would say it kind of threatens our democracy that we can't have certain things done in proper protocols now. Everything just gets fucking.
Well, I think that there is something to be said for procedure. When you talk about the violation of sanctity and trust and proper protocol procedure, it makes me think of Edward Snowden. And a lot of people hold him as an American hero because they were trying to actually hold up as secret a domestic spying program that was illegal, completely unconstitutional. But I think here in this case, this was not going to be a decision that was going to be kept secret.
No.
I think that this was an overreach by whoever leaked it, simply because the draft opinion does not represent the final decision of the court. We're not even close to them actually ruling on it. No. This is just a first salvo. So for somebody to leak something that is half-baked before the conservative justices have had a chance to discuss the legal matters, because this is really not the place to argue philosophy. This is not the place to argue, somebody's opinion on any given subject. The Supreme Court is supposed to rule on the constitutionality, the overall legality of any given issue. And so I know a lot of people are trying to make this a pro-life versus pro-choice thing, but this is a federal versus states thing.
Yeah.
And, maybe it is coming about because certain people have certain beliefs and want to challenge the decision. In the end, it is something that is more about who gets to decide, the United States or each of the individual country-like states. Should they hold the right to allow or disallow different actions inside their states? If you look at the legalization of marijuana, the states did their best to overrule federal oversight and basically unilaterally remove that classification of marijuana being a Schedule 3 narcotic. When you're also kind of looking at some of these red states that are putting into law something that goes directly counter to Roe v. Wade as an effort to to bring up a challenge to the Supreme Court decision. Each of those red states have different parameters by which they would allow prenatal termination. Very interesting. I think that a lot of people have gone the fear-mongering route on it on one side. Other people might be celebrating a little bit prematurely on the other side. I think that this is going to have a more far-reaching effect on how laws are enforced in the United States, and you're going to be able to look at the overturning of Roe v. Wade for a lot of different federal laws to be challenged.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me here is that I don't know why people want big daddy government to rule on everything, right? I'd rather be in the citizens of the state's hands to make some of these decisions. Obviously, excluding what is within our Constitution, like free speech and Second Amendment, like everything should be up to the citizens to decide how they view certain subjects. It's actually something like abortion where it's very polarizing. There is like a right, not a right or left. Yeah, I'll just put that. There's a right or left side of things, and then there's all shades of different gray. You know what I mean? It's not just black and white. So you have a lot of people it's a very polarizing issue. So you're kind of seeing one side, like you said, completely fucking freaking out, saying they're taking away women's rights, and like no, they're not. And the other ones is like, oh, it's over. There's going to be no more abortions. Like, no, that's not how it is going to be either, right? Like, there's just so much, and this is what happens when you get yourself in these echo chambers, is you don't look at things rationally and let yourself digest. Like, okay, so like, what is this? How is this going to affect us? And literally from just what's being passed, what's being talked about, is it's just going to take it out of the federal hands into the states, right? That's the main thing here. Personal opinion, I think Roe versus Wade overreached its boundaries, which I think a lot of our government overreaches their boundaries when it comes to certain laws with states. So I wouldn't necessarily be against it being overturned, but I just feel like we're seeing a lot of overreaction on both sides, because this isn't a permanent. This isn't exactly what's going to happen. This is an opinion that's going to be put forth, and they'd vote on it and see where it happens. And I'm more worried now when we make laws in this country, or we kind of make amendments or like any type of ratification in that regard. They're just gonna if one side doesn't like it, I mean both sides, because both sides do it. If one side doesn't like it, they'll just leak it, so then the public has a huge outcry, and then they don't get anything done. And then we're stuck in this state, never getting shit passed, never getting things done.
Yeah, I have to say, the conspiracy theorist in me was thinking exactly this. I am going to float the idea that it is possible that somebody got authorization to leak it to see what the public sentiment was going to end up being, and whatever arguments would come out of the shithole that is, Twitter or Narcigram or any of these things, because I do think that the court might see some value in making sure that the whole country isn't burned down either way, on the strength of what is considered to be a prenatal termination thing. And I'm not sure that the arguments for or against will be on philosophy. I think it's just going to be on procedure. The conspiracy theorist in me is very, very interested in that angle.
I don't think that's crazy though. What you said, like conspiracy theories, the reason why they work is they have that sliver of possibility. But I'll be honest with you, in today's politics, I would not be surprised. You know what? Not even just today, just in general, right? Like historically, if you look how certain kind of, I would say, radical policies get passed, you'd have newspapers leak certain things or find it. Like if people wanted stuff out, it would get out. People liked it, it goes forward. So actually, I don't rule that out. I think that's actually probably highly probable that you had a situation where they're like, we don't know how this is gonna fucking vibe with the public. So let's maybe kind of see what's out there. I have to ask this though, kind of going into this, is what do you view Roe v. Wade overall? Like, what is your viewpoint on that when it comes to federal government having this ruling regarding abortions? Like, what
I
are
think
you?
it is very interesting because on one side you have the people that want federal oversight in the matter itself. They want the ability to be able to remove fetuses prior to birth. But then those same people don't want the federal government to handle matters when it comes to the drug prohibition. And the same people that think that it's an overreach when it comes to the Roe v. Wade issue, they're happy with the drug prohibition being governed by the federal government. So I think that there is an issue with keeping that same energy. I think that people are fine with the status quo as long as it fits their narrative, and if it doesn't, they're crying and complaining about how unfair it is.
So what is your viewpoints, if you don't mind me asking, on abortion in general?
On prenatal termination, I'm neither for or against. I am for personal responsibility. I say it all the time. Unwanted pregnancy should really never be a thing because it's very easy to prevent. And there are very many ways to prevent them. So a lot of people want to talk about, my body, my right. And, we need to protect, this unborn, whatever. We understand that when you engage in relations, that there is going to be an outcome. Semen makes contact. Semen with viable sperm makes contact with the ova. Something is going to happen. Something's going to matriculate in 9 months. So, you can choose to not have sex. You can choose to use birth control. You can choose to use Plan B. You could choose to swallow.
I mean, facts.
There's so many things that you can do to prevent pregnancy that I think that people are focusing on the wrong thing. I think that personal accountability and owning up to what you do when you do adult things, I think that should be the discussion. That's my opinion.
I think we're very in line with this, but and I'm going to have a hot take here. So I personally think abortion is just flat out murder. I think you're taking and sacrificing another human's life for the convenience of yourself. If you're getting it done.
I'll ask you this question though: is this adjusted for those extreme outlier situations where, we're talking about, non-consent situations? Are we or a situation that would cost the life of the woman who is bearing the child? Is your view adjusted for that, or is it irrespective of those things?
As for SA, right? I think that for me, I still don't believe in terminating another human being's life because of that. That's just my personal belief system, right? As for the mother, I kind of feel the same energy, right? Because there's been friends that I know that their significant other almost did, but they still wanted to do it anyways. I feel like human life is so precious, and when you go forth with that act, you should understand, there are some possible outcomes of it. I understand that's a very difficult gray area, but for me and my belief system, I don't believe in terminating any life.
Well, I'm going to challenge your position on that, because if you don't believe in terminating any life in a situation where the mother would lose her life, that doesn't sound like a true pro-life position, because you're trading a life for another. You are still choosing to end a life in that situation.
Yeah, you may be choosing to terminate a life in that position. I wouldn't really say it as that. Generally, when people have some, conditions that if they do have children, there is a possibility of, passing on, right? I wouldn't necessarily say that's a life for a life. I think that's when you have kids, firmly am against going in there and aborting that child. Doesn't make sense to me. If you're going to have those actions, you need to understand that this might be the possible outcome. I'm not trying to speak from a sense where human life isn't precious, but I feel like we get into this area right now in society where we just look at the continual argument I see. It's like, oh, they're just a bunch of cells. They're just a bunch of cells. And I think that's kind of a very ignorant standpoint to have. I'm just kind of giving you my worldview. People can view differently than me. They can view my viewpoint as like, hey, like that's messed up, but if you purposely going into a clinic and terminating and extinguishing those bunch of cells because of an inconvenience. If I was in that situation where if it was my significant other, and I'll just be completely transparent, obviously I wouldn't want my girl to go through that and possibly die, right? So I will kind of even amend my standpoint. I can understand why in those certain circumstances where the wife can be terminated, how you would take that viewpoint. Because I'm going to take a step back just from my moral standpoint, putting myself in those people's shoes. I don't necessarily even understand I don't even know at this point in time how I'd react through that present time and that present stress. But I would say outside of those very, very irregular reasons for getting abortions, if you're just having an abortion because you had a fling, like, I don't think that's copacetic. I don't believe in that, because I feel like, you're essentially just taking away another human being's life because it's inconvenient for you. I think that's kind of, I guess that's the cavalier, like the way I would say, I'm not saying all left people, but a lot of left, like especially the extreme left wing people, and how they just look at it like it's just a bunch of cells. It's like at one point in time, me and you were just a bunch of cells, right? So does that mean that that anytime me and you can be exterminated because we're just technically a bunch of different cells? It bothers me as a society that we just look at human life and we just throw it out the trash. I feel like there's a lot of parents out there. There's a lot of people that want to be parents out there that can't have kids. I think that adoption isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I will fully acknowledge with the current U.S. system, our adoption agencies aren't necessarily the best and the well run. So I can see even the other side of that argument. But I don't know. For me, human life is precious and something that shouldn't just be taken for granted. Like if me and my girl got pregnant right now, would it be convenient? It wouldn't be convenient because we have like a wedding plan, we have other things planned, want to buy a house, want to get all this stuff done. But I think you can't just terminate another human being's life for convenience because like, oh fuck, I didn't wrap it, or oh fuck, I didn't take birth control. I don't know. I just that aspect of the argument bothers me.
I get that. It's a muddier situation because of the fact that we as a society have reclassified intercourse from a procreation activity to a recreation activity. Because sex is so widespread and so prevalent and the attitude has changed, I think that the attitude has also kind of changed a little bit as far as what happens when the unwanted outcome comes about. So,
well, and I'm not trying to drag this on, but I will say this is like, I think we also got to look at the history of abortions as a whole and how essentially it was used as eugenics, and like used against, this is why I kind of see a problem with it, is used as eugenics, like, oh, this is how we could get rid of people with disabilities, and so we get rid of minorities. And that's the cold hard truth nobody wants to talk about. Like, abortion was used a lot in black communities, like a lot, especially at the precipice where you're like, oh, you know what? We need to kind of get the population down, or if a child's born with special disabilities, oh, let's just kill it. You know what I mean?
A lot of people don't know that since Roe v. Wade, 48% of all Black pregnancies have ended in prenatal termination. Mm-hmm. So when you look at the census, you'll see that the racial makeup of the country for Black people has stayed stagnant while everyone else has gone up besides Caucasians who have come down as the country becomes more multicultural. But notice that there is advancements in population size. And of course, with the larger population size, you also have more political power. So a lot of people like to uphold, these things, but it's more complicated than simply, it's my body, so I'm going to do what I want with it. There are other social implications that that factor in. But you, the viewer, we got to hear your opinion, because me and Paul, we're over here just talking our shit, but we want to hear from you, particularly the ladies. We want to know your opinion on the leak itself. We'd also like to know your opinion of the subject itself. I'm Dr. Evil Genius.
I'm Captain Paul.
We the fuck up out here.